Apparently golf is turning into a weekly thing for me. I was going to wait to do this week's developer Q&A until after I'd been golfing with a good friend of mine and do the usual kind of thing of going into this completely blind and reading it. However, it arrived just before I left. I have read the questions and hoo boy, those of you who are fans of ranty Benzie, you are in for a treat. Those of you who just want to see me talk positively about a game that is ripping itself apart at the seams at this point, I wouldn't continue with this video after the first two questions. I've actually reversed the order of this week's Dev Q&A because those two questions at the end, the first two originally, are just, my goodness, you just wait and see. They are absolutely incredible. So, before we jump into the dev Q&A this week, I do want to say I have actually had Cloud and a couple of the devs reach out to me. That video I did on the Plex situation that's going on with the different changes they're putting out there, apparently that finally got the developers' attention, and I had Cloud reach out and say, look, do you have any ideas? And I got one of the other devs reach out and say, you know, a whole load of stuff and finish it off with the wonderful line of, we appreciate your feedback, but please could you word it more kindly next time? Well, no, I'm not going to word things more kindly if they require me to be quite harsh in them. I've spent 3 years being kind about mistake after mistake, and it's gotten nowhere. Harsh words finally seem to have done something, so whilst I'm not going to go out of my way to be an asshole about this, I am absolutely going to be as honest as I feel I need to be. Now, the result in this has been mixed, to say the least. A lot of the stuff I suggested to Cloud was kind of immediately pushed back on, despite the fact that it is stuff that the entire community has been crying out for, and recently in the CC chat on the official Discord as well, I did ask some questions, I suggested some stuff to him, and he came back with just some random comments that didn't seem at all related. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, I'm sure. For the time being, though, let's jump right into this week's developer Q&A, which is the week of the 28th of February through to the 6th of March. Question number 1 then. Why do you keep adding arena modes like Faction Wargames and Corporation Clash? Matchmaking in Faction Wargames can take up to 2 hours. It's shown pretty clearly that 99.99% of players are not interested in arena modes. Keep these things to time-limited events only. I actually have to agree. As excited as I was at Faction Wargames when it first launched, the fact is it takes you out of the game. It's just dock up and you go into your own instanced version of the game that has no actual destruction. It doesn't help the economy in any way. Doing it more like EVE Online and encouraging players to go out into low-sec to actually fight other players there, absolutely. And there are ways you can limit that. You could easily set up an arena that you have to warp into in low-sec that is exclusive to Tech 7 or lower frigates, for example. That's possible. We know that NetEase can do this kind of thing. So doing that, and then the longer that you are in that arena, the more loyalty points you earn, that could be a really interesting way of doing things, rather than this instanced queue up stuff. It just doesn't work. And ultimately, they're right. Whoever's asking this question is right. The more modes you add, the more you divide the few people who are interested. If you imagine you've got 100 people online wanting to do these modes. If you have one mode, that's 100 people in the same queue. If you've got 2 modes, that's now only 50 people in the queues. If you've got 3 modes, that's, yeah, it adds up. You get my point. Now, unfortunately, I think Lance kind of takes the wrong end of this question and runs with it. This is indeed a way to improve matchmaking efficiency. We will add a reasonable time-limited mechanic to the future Faction Wargames so players will have a better experience. Yeah, so basically focusing in on the whole thing of like making it a time-limited thing to help with matchmaking. Just get rid of it at this point. No one's using it. No one is using this situation reliably. You can just get rid of it and make something better out of its wreckage. Like, genuinely, just get rid of Faction Wargames at this point because almost no one is using it, and the people who are using it, I would guarantee almost that most people who are still using Faction Wargames don't enjoy it. They're just doing it to grind it because there's some expensive stuff they can get with the loyalty points, etc. Make it much more interesting and engaging. Require an undock. This is supposed to be an MMO. Like, if you're gonna take away the reason to undock for anything, if we're gonna have more things like Corporations Clash and Faction Wargames and things like that added to the game, there's no reason to undock, which means it's not really an MMO anymore. It just becomes an arcade arena game. You just pick which mode you want to play and off you go. It's something like War Robots or World of Warships. It's not an MMO anymore, is it? Anyway, let's move on to question number 2, because that one's going to get me irritated, just because you've got someone saying that, look, no one's using this stuff, make it, event only, and people would actually use it. And the dev's going, oh yeah, let's add more mechanics and make things more complex and expand upon this system that no one uses. It's a waste of dev time. Make something that people will use and actually pushes the game forward. Question number 2 then. When an Alliance or Corp member shares a system in chat, it's really helpful if it shows the number of jumps it's away from you or from your Corp's little system. For example, shared system Jita, X jumps away will be a great quality of life update. I mean, it's one extra button tap, you tap it and then just set destination and it'll show you. As long as you're not using autopilot at the time, at which point, in fairness, if someone says, hey, is anyone near this, you make the choice just to pause a second and go, right, okay, yeah, no, I'm a bit far away, and then you reset your autopilot. This is kind of in the game already. That said, I don't think it would necessarily be a bad thing, but it is an additional server load thing. It means every time you link a system, rather than just giving the name, the game and like a pointer that you can click on and it'll open up additional stuff. Now, every time someone links this in chat, imagine there's 100 people in chat and someone links a system. That now means the other 99 people, and indeed the one who's linked it, all 100 of those accounts, suddenly have to calculate how many jumps they are away. And that's obviously going to change as well based on whether or not you go through high-sec systems only, whether you're allowed through null, that kind of thing there. It's additional computational load, which means ultimately I'm against this, because it means every time someone posts in chat, everyone gets additional computational load, rather than the current system, which means anyone who wants to check just has to tap basically 2 buttons. Tap the thing, tap set destination, done. That's the same thing. I would honestly be against this, even though, yes, it is technically a quality of life update. Lancelot, on the other hand, doesn't seem to care about the fact that it could end up being additional server load. We will add this feature in the future update. In the future, admittedly, so it could be any time between now and Judgment Day. We hope this improvement makes it easier for you and your Alliance or Corp members to share information. Well, it will make it easier, unnecessarily easier, I would argue, and it's going to cause other issues on the side. So, make of that what you will. Make of that what you will. I think quality of life reaches a certain point, and I think we're actually now at the point where the game doesn't even need more quality of life. Like, there's a lot of stuff in the game now that is so much better than it was at launch, just due to quality of life changes and how they've mixed things around. Fuel being the top example off my head. But that doesn't mean that we need to keep doing this. There are more important pressing matters right now, actual proper content, a way to keep new players sticking around, basically anything that's not capitals, right? Which brings us to question number 3. Oh boy, brace yourselves, because this is where things get messy. Question number 3. Will we get exploring capital ships and new content for capitals?
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Don't hate the player who asked this dumbass, screwed up question. Hate the question itself and hate the mindset that frickin' well inspired this crap. Okay, let's read Lancelot's response first, because otherwise I'm just going to go on a ramble and not even bother with his response, because his response is also, yeah, it's an exciting combination to put exploration and capital ship together. We never thought of it this way, but this is a great direction. We will definitely think about its feasibility. This may become an amazing gameplay. This is literally the worst question I've ever heard in a developer Q&A. Like, this is the worst. It does not get worse than this. Let's just examine this on different levels, shall we? First of all, exploring capitals. The whole point of exploration, literally the term exploration, is moving around from system to system, right? You can't explore by sitting in one place. You have to move around, right? We're okay with that basic freaking concept. Exploration requires the ship to move around. Now, tell me, when you compare something like, I don't know, an Astero or a Probe Explorer or a Heron Explorer to a Naglfar or a Phoenix, how do those differ in terms of speed and agility, right? And I'm asking Lancelot this one because this seems like it should be a basic question, but apparently not. apparently this is something that's exciting to Lancedot, because, okay, so my probe has the advantage that it can jump from system to system quickly. It can scan quickly, and if it spots a site in local, it can quickly warp to that point, get the stuff I need, and then get out, right? That's exploration. That's the key freaking concept of exploration. Capital ships are slow and heavy. There is a reason that you don't see people going on exploratory, on big exploratory expeditions using fricking aircraft carriers. No, you don't use an oil tanker to go exploring. You use small, nimble craft that are going to help you navigate the freaking environment. This is just such a dumbass idea on surface level, because anyone who stops to think about this for the briefest of seconds, anyone who has 2 brain cells remaining that they can rub together to get that little spark of thought into their head, is going to look at this and go, that just doesn't work. And exploring capital is just, what? How would that even work? And moreover, why? Why would you need an exploration capital? Like, an exploration frigate already does everything that the bullcrap exploration system has to offer, right? So why do you need a capital for it? What does a capital do that a probe explorer or an Astero with a relic and a data analyzer fitted to it doesn't already do? Second point. Third point. I've lost count at this point because I feel like my brain cells are just committing suicide to get to this point, to bring myself down to the level of this question and its answer. Why? Why? Who is sitting there in a capital? Who's sitting in a revelation going, oh, you know what, I wish this revelation could jump to a relic site and harvest it up. Who's doing that? And just... exploration, as crap as it is, as boring and dull and mishmash, hodgepodge, hit and miss as it is basically the one thing left that small ships can do that big ships can't. And Lancedot's like, we never thought of it this way. It's a great direction. We can charge explorers more money to go exploring and buying stupid capital ships. Fuck me if this happens, I am out of this game. I am so out of this game at this point because, this question makes me so angry. It makes me so angry because on one hand you've got someone who wants to take away the only semi-decent small ship content that exists and hand it over to capitals that already have everything in this game. Secondly, you've got a developer going, this sounds like a really good idea, but you stop for the briefest of seconds to let those brain cells snap into position. The briefest of glances at this idea just showcases that it is just, Why? I swear to God, the day that they announce that they are adding exploring capital ships to the game is the day I officially quit Eve Echoes. I delete my account. Like, I actually delete my freaking account because I'm done at that point. Because that just shows that the community doesn't have a brain cell left to think with, and the developers are just sitting there going, that sounds like a great option to, make the idiots swipe for more money, so screw it, let's do it. No. God, if this happens. I'm going to move on to question 4 before I give myself a hernia, okay? Due to the way drones work, command range, they are effectively the only ship class limited by a targeting range. This means drone ships are easily outclassed by every other weapon system. If you don't plan on adding targeting range, at least rebalance drone control ranges so they're not outclassed by all others anymore. Oh boy, there's a lot to unpack there as well. Looks like Ranty Benzie is not going back anytime soon. Let's read the answer though. We understand your concern, says Lancedot, but we believe maintaining the differences between different weapon systems is very important. It gives players different combat experience and strategic choices. At the same time, increasing the targeting range will have a very large impact on non-drone players. We currently don't see the necessity for doing so. Do you know why? Let's unpack the question. And again, not attacking the player, attacking the question and the thought process, or lack of it, that resulted in the question, right? If this is your question, don't be upset with me. I'm just explaining why it is a stupid question, and you should have thought longer and harder before typing this one to the developers. The only ship class limited by a targeting range. Yes, I agree. Targeting ranges, lock ranges, should be a thing in EVE Echoes. That instantly solves a lot of the meta problems that we have. It means that sniping isn't just the be-all and end-all of PvE, for example. But the developers have clearly said they're not going to add lock ranges. Okay, so we can accept lock ranges are not going to happen. As much as, like this question person's asking, I agree. I think lock ranges would be a brilliant addition to EVE. And I think a lot of people say, you know, oh, but it's so complex. No, it's really not. There's even targeting range on the targeting range skills in EVE Echoes. You also have things like sensor strength still on your ships that just do nothing. Because the developers took a system, copy-pasted it across, and then just only decided to implement like 70% of it. But okay, they're not going to add locking range as a mechanic to the game. Fair enough, we can move on for that. Therefore, drones are the only ship class limited by targeting range, or as other weapons call it, actual range. Because, okay, my drone ship has a 45-kilometer range on it, basic, because I've trained up all of the skills, and if it doesn't have a range bonus, it's got 45 kilometers range on it, right? That is significantly longer than the small missiles or the small strike cannons that are fitted to that exact same ship. Then we look at ships that have an additional 100 kilometers onto their drone range, or however long. If you've got a 50 kilometer additional drone range, you've got a 95 kilometer operational range for your drones. Again, please tell me how far that your railguns can shoot. How far can your autocannons shoot? Your beam lasers, your pulse lasers, your torpedoes, your missiles, whatever the hell weapon system you fancy. It's just a way for drones to actually have range, you know? Yeah. You don't need drones to have longer targeting range. At least rebalance drone control ranges so they're not outclassed by all others anymore. What are you on about? Drones aren't weak because, like, oh, the range is terrible on them. If you've looked at a drone ship and gone, oh, the range is terrible on these, I suggest you probably visit an optometrist, because if you can get 95 kilometers range out of drones and they apply perfectly, then what's your problem? I can't get that out of my autocannons. I can't get that out of my torpedoes and things like that, can I? So what's your problem? What actually is the problem here? They're not outclassed because of range concerns. They're outclassed because they only have Meta 8 modules, whereas everything else has C, B, and A types. They are outranged because of how the drone damage amplifiers work. They are outclassed because, well, they're not outclassed. Plenty of people use drones. There's a reason they wanted to add anti-drone pulse bombs to PvP, because drones were so ridiculously popular. Drones don't need rebalancing. All the other weapon systems do. If you're sitting there going, oh, drones are terrible, tell me you've never flown a rattlesnake. Tell me that you've never flown a Dominix in PvP. Tell me that you've never actually used drones, because drones are my main weapon system in EVE, on EVE Echoes. They are my main weapon system, with missiles and cannons in second. Missiles technically wanting to be higher on the use, but getting less actual use because they're god-awful, because NetEase haven't figured out how missile applications work in the game that they are designing. But drones are not outclassed because of range at all, like at all. Genuinely, drones are not outclassed because of range. They're outclassed due to meta-level concerns, and they're outclassed because why would you ever use anything other than an Apocalypse Striker in Clariland PvE, because you can get better range with those. It doesn't mean the drones need buffing, it means that, yeah, we should have a lock-on range, we should have targeting range, and the Apocalypse should drop to 60 freaking kilometers. And, you know, enjoy that. Because that's balance, right? And I can hear people screaming and, you know, almost committing seppuku in the distance there at the concept of the precious Apocalypse Striker getting nerfed. But that's the point we're at in this game. Jeez, I mean, I'm just glad. I'm glad that Lancedot on this one, at the very least, actually says, yeah, you know what, we don't need to up drone range. What you need to do is make it so that the Navy issue drones aren't ridiculously expensive because they're only available in a game mode that literally no one plays anymore, and you guys are still absolutely intent on holding onto until the game dies, or the heat death of the universe, whichever comes first. we need better drones, we need better drone modules, and we need actual gameplay changes. The Apocalypse Striker as a ship is fine. The trouble is, the content is just crap. Therefore, if everything just flies towards you in a straight line, the downsides that the Apocalypse Striker has, and it does have downsides, it's just those downsides never actually come into play. And so why would you swap for lower DPS on a drone ship that can sit at maximum range and just let the drones do all the work, and still have weapons that do extra work? Just, I mean, look at the Rattlesnake. You know, you've got missiles and you've got drones on that ship, both of which can have pretty good range on them. You can easily set up a Rattlesnake sniper fit, right? So range is not a concern here. It's just that there are a set number of ships that do things better because the gameplay is so just bullcrap boring and so poorly designed and implemented that the downsides that those ships theoretically have don't come into play. Whereas the downsides that drones have, the additional skill point investment for actually having a third skill, obviously say large drones operation, large drone upgrade, and the drone skill, plus the fact that you're also going to need some kind of high slot weapon on a drone ship as well in Eve Echo, so you're actually having to train 5 skills up. Like if you're using a Rattlesnake, you need large missile operation, large missile upgrade, large drone operation, large drone upgrade, and drone. Whereas if you're flying, say, a Bargorn, all you need is large laser upgrade and large laser operation. 2 skills compared to 5. Apocalypse Striker, same thing. That's the issue that we have, that the drone stuff, it requires additional SP investment. It is the most expensive weapon system to operate by far in Eve Echoes, and those downsides actually come into play, whereas the downsides on lasers like the Apocalypse Striker don't come into play, because that absolutely god-awful tracking, especially if you're in siege mode, doesn't matter if the rats fly in a straight line at you, and tracking literally ceases to exist in the equation. I don't know. I'm a little worried, actually, now that I've calmed down a little bit, that third question's answer is going to really upset and rile some people and, you know, maybe get me in trouble with YouTube. Like, this video could genuinely be the first one I've ever done that actually gets demonetized. Because, that's an aggressive response to a question. I'm sorry if anyone gets offended by that, by the way, but I find that question genuinely incredibly offensive, and I find the answer to it even more so. Just, that is so offensive. Yeah, let's take away the one bit of content that small ships have that is somewhat working and give that to capitals. Capital pilots already have the most amount of content available to them in the entire game. And this brings me nicely to that point I was talking about Cloud talking about new stuff. And he mentioned that actually, you know, they've wanted to just fill the gaps in the game and, you know, push the bigger ships and stuff like this. They now want to go back and start adding and upgrading and, you know, finishing off some of these systems, which, if true, will be really nice. Like, genuinely, I actually hold a lot of, you know, yeah, that's a good idea. Go back and finish Exploration, go back and finish Nihilus, make PvE actually interesting. But halfway through, he decided to just suddenly, literally out of nowhere, flip onto this whole thing of, oh yeah, but around about January the 11th, this gang of RMT people came in and started making a load of ISK and with tier 6, 7 ships, and it just shot up the price of Plex. And it's like, yeah, but you understand the easiest way to combat RMT, right, is just to give people content. The reason people are going and using RMT services, the reason that those services exist, is because there is a demand for those services. And if there's a demand, you have to ask yourself why there is a demand for those services. And honestly, in my opinion, it's because basically the game tells you you are just jack squat out of content and fun unless you're in a capital ship. And capitals are ridiculously expensive. And it takes a long time to grind into a capital. So you could either spend weeks and months grinding up all the ISK you need to get all of that stuff together to buy a capital, or you could just log onto a website and swipe your credit card and get some illegally earned real money, transaction, ISK, and use that to buy it. Like, if you gave people content that didn't require them to be in these ridiculously big and expensive ships, then maybe people would stop feeling pressured into, you know, being in those ships, and therefore they could have fun in the game and not feel like they need to go to an illegal website in order to buy money for the game to get to the fun freaking part of the game. Like, if you just made it fun, then people don't feel like they need to skip the content, right? Like, is that a really difficult concept to come to here? Like, I don't think that's difficult. I don't think that's a difficult concept. Just, you know, if people are paying to skip to the stuff they want to get to, maybe give them other ways to get there or other stuff to do in the meantime. I think there's also just a part of this that is ultimately now, we're seeing just in general, the trend across video games is that live service games are being shut down left, right, and centre. Doesn't take someone with an incredible knowledge of the gaming industry to see that lots of live service games are suddenly being axed. Games that launch are being axed within a year from the live service model. Live service being that kind of thing where, you know, it wants you to log in every day, you get login rewards, you get rewards for playing. The game is designed to essentially try and get you to part with as much of your money as possible and spend as much of your time as possible in the game. The trouble with that as a business idea, and anyone who was, you know, just casually passing at the time it was suggested could have told these publishers, is that that's all very well and good if you're the only person doing it. But when two games come along and those games both say, I want all of your spare time and I want all of your spare money. I only have one lot of spare time and one lot of spare money. I can't spend twice the amount of spare time that I actually have. I can't spend twice the amount of money that I actually have. Therefore, I can only support one of those games, which means if one of, you know, I'm only going to support one of those games, which means the other one's going to die, which makes business decisions like NetEase going through at the moment ridiculous. And I do intend to do an actual video because a lot of people are like, oh, do you think NetEase could, you know, lose the license? Do you think NetEase are worried about it? And there's so much, like, people just misunderstand what NetEase's actual business plan is. And it's a business. It's a business. A business plan is a business plan, right? You know, be unbiased as possible about that. But NetEase doesn't really care about longevity in games, or at least the publishers at the top of NetEase don't care about longevity in games. To give the long and short of it toward the end of this video, and I'll do a proper one on this at some point in the future, I promise. The long and short of it is that they're trend chasers. They're like EA used to be in the 90s. They look around and go, oh, that's popular, we should have one of those. So they build a game, they bring a load of new players in, and then as soon as that game breaks even, that's it. Awesome. We have got this into a profitable state. Everything else we get is fantastic. So they cut down on the support for that game. They move the developers onto new projects to chase the next trend. And then anyone who's left in the first game and still paying is just profit. At which point, a second big thing is getting launched, and hopefully a load of new players join that one and spend big and get heavily involved in it, again, until NetEase decides they have a new trend to chase. It's what's happened with Eve Echoes, it's what happens with so many of NetEase's games. It's why they have literally 3 or 4 Battle Royales at this point that exist, because they keep chasing the different flavours of Battle Royale. They had like Cyber Hunter, which was like the PUBG version, then they've got a new one, I forget what it's called, that's very much like Warzone and stuff like this. They are trend chasers, which means once they move on to the next thing, the previous thing just doesn't matter to them anymore. Get as much money out of it while you can, and when it shuts down, oh well, that just means we can take those developers off that project and put it onto something else, right? It's all a win for NetEase. So just please don't expect NetEase to want to change that business plan. It works for them. It's what they do, and it's just unfortunate that Eve has been caught up in this, and NetEase have dialed this strategy up to 11 over basically the last year and a bit. Anyway, folks, that's me and the developer Q&A for today. Probably the most aggressive developer Q&A I've ever done. I know some of you are going to be upset with me on that one. Again, I say, if you want to get angry at me, don't get angry at me. Get angry at don't get angry at me for getting angry at a game. Get angry at the developers who made me angry in the first place, right? Like, if someone slaps me and I shout at them, don't get angry at me for shouting at them. Get angry at the guy who slapped me. Make sense? And if you want to see happy Benzie, I do still exist. I'm just in the EVE Online videos right now. And I'm hoping one day I can come back to being happy Benzie and EVE Echoes, but when I get asked, when dumbass questions like, can we get exploring capital ships comes up, forgive me if I lose my cool just a little bit. Anyway, folks, thank you for watching right the way through to the end. Huge thanks to my Patreons who keep this channel going. Means a lot to me that people pledge to support. Check out the names in the stars at the end of this video. If you want your name in the stars, come join me on Patreon. Help keep content like this and other content still coming. In addition, I have a PayPal tip jar and a Redbubble merchandise store. Thanks for watching, folks. Happy sailing, and see you in New Eden!